Most people already know the story of the Titanic. They know it struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean, they know the ship sank during its maiden voyage, and they know that more than 1,500 people died as a result. This version of the story has been repeated for more than a century.
But what most people never fully examine is why survival rates were so unequal. Why some passengers escaped quickly, while others never had a realistic chance. And more importantly, how many of those outcomes were shaped long before the Titanic ever encountered ice. This video is not about retelling a well-known disaster. It is about examining documented decisions, structural design choices, and operational assumptions that influenced who had access to safety and who did not. The RMS Titanic was built by Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Northern Ireland. It was owned and operated by the White Star Line, a company known for emphasizing luxury and comfort over speed competition. Construction began in 1909, and the ship was completed in 1912. At the time of launch, Titanic was the largest moving object ever built by humans. The ship measured approximately 269 meters long, weighed over 46,000 gross tons, and was designed to carry more than 2,200 passengers and crew. It represented industrial confidence, engineering ambition, and social prestige. The Titanic was often described as unsinkable. This term did not mean engineers believed it could never fail. It meant they believed that the likelihood of catastrophic failure was extremely low. That assumption shaped how safety risks were evaluated. Titanic was divided into 16 watertight compartments. These compartments were designed to contain flooding in case of damage. However, they did not extend fully upward to the ship's upper decks. If more than 4 compartments flooded, water could spill from one into the next. Naval architects were aware of this limitation. It was documented. It was accepted. Extending those compartments fully would have required structural changes that reduced interior space and affected luxury accommodations. The ship was designed to meet safety regulations, not exceed them. Passenger placement aboard Titanic followed a clear class structure. First-class cabins were located higher in the ship, close to the boat deck and lifeboats. Second-class cabins were positioned below them. Third-class passengers, many of them immigrants, were housed deep within the lower decks, often near the bow or stern. To reach the lifeboats, third-class passengers had to navigate long corridors, staircases, and locked or confusing passageways. Officially, this separation existed to comply with immigration and health regulations. In practice, it created unequal access to emergency exits. In the hours leading up to the collision, the Titanic received multiple iceberg warnings from nearby ships. One of the most significant warnings came from the SS Mesaba at approximately 9:40 p.m. on April 14, 1912. The message warned of large fields of pack ice and icebergs directly along Titanic's projected route. The warning was received by Titanic's radio operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. The message was logged. However, it was not immediately delivered to the bridge in a manner that prompted urgent action. At the time, Titanic was traveling at approximately 22.5 knots, or about 26 miles per hour. This was near its maximum operational speed. The ship's captain, Edward J. Smith, was aware that ice had been reported in the region. However, reducing speed was not considered necessary. The sea was calm, visibility appeared clear, and prevailing belief suggested that icebergs could be spotted and avoided in time. Maintaining speed was considered normal procedure. This decision was not reckless by contemporary standards. It was based on confidence in experience, ship design, and prevailing industry assumptions. But confidence reduced the margin for error. At 11:40 p.m., an iceberg was sighted directly ahead. Despite attempts to turn and reverse engines, the ship's speed and proximity made full avoidance impossible. The iceberg damaged the hull along the starboard side, opening the ship to flooding across multiple compartments. The damage was not immediately obvious to passengers. There was no sudden explosion. The ship remained upright. Lights stayed on. This delayed recognition of danger caused confusion and hesitation.
Titanic carried 20 lifeboats, with a total capacity of approximately 1,178 people. This was not due to physical limitation. The ship was legally compliant with maritime regulations at the time. Those regulations based lifeboat requirements on ship tonnage, not passenger count. As evacuation began, many lifeboats were launched partially filled. Some carried fewer than half their capacity. Crew members feared overloading boats. Passengers hesitated to board. The ship still appeared stable. As a result, hundreds of seats went unused. There is another documented factor that significantly affected survival. The Titanic was not entirely alone. A nearby ship, the SS Californian, was positioned within visual distance. Crew members aboard the Californian observed white rockets being fired into the sky. However, these rockets were not interpreted as distress signals. At the time, there was no universally enforced standard requiring ships to treat rockets as emergency calls. Additionally, the Californian's wireless radio operator had shut down communications for the night. No radio contact was possible. From the Titanic, the rockets represented emergency signals. From the Californian, they appeared unclear and distant. By the time communication was re-established, the Titanic had already sunk. Rescue arrived hours later. For many people in the water, those hours were fatal. The sinking of the Titanic was not caused by a single mistake. It was the result of multiple accepted decisions, each considered reasonable on its own. Design limitations, operational confidence, outdated regulations, delayed communication. Together, they created irreversible outcomes. History shows us something uncomfortable. When systems fail, they do not fail equally. They reflect the priorities they were built upon. Titanic did not invent inequality, it revealed it. Once structure determines access to safety, individual intent no longer matters. Design decides outcomes. The Titanic is not just a story about an iceberg or a ship that sank in 1912. It is a case study in how assumptions shape decisions, how systems distribute risk, and how safety becomes unequal long before disaster strikes. And that is why this story still matters. Because technology changes, but the way systems prioritize people often does not.